Hello and welcome back to the Sleepy Darwin. Whether you're here to drift peacefully towards sleep or simply to let your mind wander through the gentle mysteries of life itself, you found exactly the right place. Tonight, we're tracing a family tree that stretches back nearly 4 billion years, connecting you to every creature that has ever drawn breath, every plant that has ever reached towards sunlight, and every microscopic pioneer that first whispered, "I will continue," in ancient seas. I'll do my best to keep our journey through deep time soothing and contemplative, but fair warning, the story of how all life is connected is remarkably beautiful. I hope this exploration isn't so fascinating that it keeps you wide-eyed with wonder, but if it does, at least you'll drift off knowing your place in the magnificent web of existence. Before we begin our gentle descent through evolutionary history, if you find comfort in these sleepy explorations of science, a like and subscribe would mean more than you know it. Helps keep this quiet corner of curiosity alive. And please, let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is in your part of the world. I love imagining all of us, descendants of the same ancient lineage, finding connection across the globe. Now settle in, let your breathing slow, and prepare to discover that you are never truly alone. Close your eyes for a moment, if you can. Let yourself drift backward through time, not just years or decades, but eons. Past the rise and fall of civilizations, past the first human footsteps, past the age of dinosaurs, past the first flowers blooming on ancient shores. Keep drifting back and back, until you reach a time so remote that the very concept of time feels different, softer somehow, more patient. We're going back 3.8 billion years now, to an Earth you wouldn't recognize. If you could somehow float above this primordial world, you'd see no familiar continents, no green forests, no blue skies as we know them. The atmosphere hangs thick and orange, heavy with methane and ammonia. The sun looks younger, dimmer, like a shy child learning to shine. And below you stretches an endless ocean, not the clear blue of today's seas, but something darker, richer, like a vast cosmic soup simmering under an alien sky. This is where our story begins. Not with a bang, but with a gentle stirring in warm, shallow waters. Picture, if you will, the edges of this ancient ocean, not beaches as we know them, but rocky shores where waves lap against stone that has never known the touch of a living thing. The water here is different too. It tastes of iron and sulfur, carries within it a complex brew of molecules that took millions of years to gather from the cosmic dust of a cooling planet. In these tidal pools, something magical is happening. Something so quiet and gradual that if you were there, you might think nothing was happening at all. But in the warm, mineral-rich waters, chemistry is becoming something more than chemistry. Amino acids, the building blocks of proteins, are beginning to dance together in ways they never had before. Imagine these molecules as letters of an alphabet that doesn't yet know it's an alphabet. Carbon linking to nitrogen, nitrogen embracing hydrogen, sulfur finding its place in the growing chain. They're not trying to create life. They don't have intention or purpose yet. They're simply following the gentle rules of chemistry, the way water flows downhill or the way warmth rises from sun-heated stone. But here's the beautiful thing. These amino acids are learning to dance in patterns. Like children playing a game they're inventing as they go, they begin to form longer chains, more complex structures. Some of these molecular dances fall apart almost as soon as they begin. Others find a rhythm that lets them persist a little longer in the warm water, swaying with the gentle currents. And then, in one of those moments that seems impossible until it happens, some of these molecular dancers discover something extraordinary. They learn to make copies of themselves. Think about this for a moment. Really let it settle into your drowsy mind. Somewhere in a tidal pool that might have been no larger than the bathtub you soaked in this evening, a molecule figured out how to say, "I will continue." Not in words, of course, but in the fundamental language of chemistry itself. It was the universe's first whisper of, "I am, and I will be." This wasn't life as we know it yet. No cells, no DNA as we understand it today, no heartbeat or breath or the warm pulse of blood. But it was the first echo of something that would eventually become your heartbeat, your breath, the warm blood flowing through your hands as you perhaps pull a blanket closer while listening to this story. The early replicators were probably made of RNA, a molecule that's like DNA's more adventurous cousin, able to both store information and catalyze chemical reactions. RNA was life's first attempt at being both library and librarian, both the sheet music and the instrument capable of playing the song. Imagine these first replicating molecules like ancient storytellers, each one carrying a tale in its molecular structure. Some stories were too complex and fell apart in the telling. Others were too simple and had nothing interesting to say. But a few, just a precious few, found that perfect balance between complexity and stability, between novelty and reliability. These successful storytellers began to spread through the warm seas, each one copying itself, passing along its molecular tale to the next generation. And here's where the magic really begins. Sometimes, in the copying process, tiny mistakes would happen. Most of these mistakes made the story worse, harder to tell, more likely to fall apart. But occasionally, very occasionally, a mistake would make the story better, more interesting, more capable of surviving in the challenging waters of early Earth. This was evolution's first quiet breath. Not yet the grand symphony of diversity we see today, but the first tentative notes of a song that would eventually include whale songs and bird calls, the rustle of leaves, and the laughter of children playing in summer gardens. Now, let's drift forward in time. Still unimaginably ancient by human standards, but newer in the context of our story. We're moving ahead perhaps 500 million years from those first replicators to around 3.5 to 3.8 billion years ago. The molecular storytellers have been busy, experimenting with different ways of organizing themselves, different strategies for survival and reproduction. And here, in this primordial world, we encounter one of the most profound characters in the entire story of life, Luca, the last universal common ancestor. Luca wasn't a creature in any sense we'd recognize today. You couldn't have seen Luca swimming through ancient seas or crawling across prehistoric rocks. Luca was more like a moment in time when all the experiments in early life converged on a particularly successful way of being alive. Think of Luca as life's first great success story. Not an individual organism, but a community of early life forms that had figured out some fundamental truths about how to exist in this challenging world. These early pioneers had discovered the power of the cell membrane, a simple but revolutionary boundary that could separate the inside from the outside, creating a tiny private space where the chemistry of life could unfold without being immediately washed away by the vast ocean. Luca's descendants had also stumbled upon something even more remarkable, a universal genetic code. Picture this as life's first shared language, a way of translating between the world of genetic information and the world of proteins, those incredibly versatile molecules that do most of the actual work of being alive. This genetic language was built on the simplest possible alphabet, just 4 letters, which we now call A, T, G, and C. But like the way just 26 letters can spell every word in English, every poem ever written, every story ever told, these 4 simple chemical letters proved capable of spelling out every living thing that would ever exist. The beautiful thing about this genetic language is its universality. Whether we're talking about the bacteria that help digest your dinner, the houseplant sitting on your windowsill, or the cat that might be curled up beside you as you listen to this, we all speak the same fundamental molecular language. We all use the same genetic dictionary to translate DNA into the proteins that make life possible. When Luca's lineage made this breakthrough, they were essentially establishing the ground rules for all future life on Earth. They were saying, in effect, this is how we'll store information. This is how we'll pass it on to our descendants. This is the language we'll all speak, no matter how different we might become. But Luca was also generous in a way that still echoes through every living thing today. The early life forms that made up Luca's community were surprisingly willing to share genetic information with each other. Unlike the more conservative approach that most modern organisms take to their DNA, these early life forms engaged in widespread horizontal gene transfer, essentially sharing useful genetic innovations with their neighbors. Imagine a community of early life forms constantly trading tips and tricks for survival, sharing useful genes the way neighbors might share recipes or gardening advice. Oh, you've figured out a better way to process sulfur. Let me copy that gene. Your method for protecting against DNA damage is brilliant. Mind if I borrow it? This generous sharing meant that beneficial innovations could spread quickly through the entire community of early life. It was evolution's first experiment with cooperation over pure competition, and it created a stable foundation that all future life would build upon. Luca's gift to us, to every living thing, was this stable, universal system for being alive. The same basic cellular machinery that kept Luca's community thriving in ancient seas is working right now in every cell of your body. The same genetic code that spelled out Luca's simple existence now spells out your complex human form, complete with the capacity for thought, emotion, creativity, and wonder. As you breathe quietly while listening to this story, your lungs are using cellular machinery that descended directly from Luca. Your heart beats using proteins that are variations on themes first established in Luca's community. Even your brain, with all its remarkable capacity for consciousness, memory, and dreams, is built using the same fundamental genetic language that Luca pioneered in Earth's ancient seas. Let's pause here for a moment and really appreciate what this means. Every time your heart beats, and it's beating right now as you listen, a steady rhythm that's been with you since before you were born, you're experiencing an echo of those first successful molecular dances in ancient tidal pools. The proteins that make your heart muscle contract are built according to instructions written in the same four-letter alphabet that Luca's descendants first established. The cellular machinery that converts the food you ate today into the energy that powers your thoughts right now is a direct descendant of the metabolic pathways that kept Luca's community alive billions of years ago. This isn't metaphor or poetry, though it certainly feels poetic. This is the literal truth of our shared molecular heritage. When scientists sequence your DNA and compare it to the DNA of a tree or a mushroom or a whale, they find the same basic system at work everywhere. The same genetic code, the same cellular structures, the same fundamental approach to the challenge of being alive. Your mitochondria, those tiny powerhouses inside each of your cells that convert oxygen and nutrients into usable energy, are themselves the descendants of ancient bacteria that once lived freely in Earth's early oceans. Around 2 billion years ago, some of these bacteria found their way inside larger cells and decided to stay, beginning one of the most successful partnerships in the history of life. These bacterial partners are still with you today, still working tirelessly to power your every thought and movement. In fact, you have more mitochondrial DNA in your body than human DNA. Another reminder that you are not an isolated individual but a walking community, a collaboration between different forms of life that first learned to work together in Earth's ancient seas. Even the process by which you grew from a single fertilized cell into the complex person you are today follows patterns that were first established in Luca's time. The way your cells divide, the way they communicate with each other, the way they organize themselves into tissues and organs, all of this uses molecular tools and techniques that have been refined over billions of years but never fundamentally changed. When you were developing in your mother's womb, your cells were following genetic instructions written in the same language that guided the development of every human who ever lived, every mammal that ever walked the earth, every fish that ever swam the seas, all the way back to the simplest multicellular organisms that first experimented with working together rather than going it alone. As you rest there, perhaps feeling the gentle weight of blankets, the comfort of a warm room, the security of shelter from the night, let yourself appreciate the vast patience that brought you to this moment. Evolution is not hasty. It doesn't rush toward predetermined goals or worry about deadlines. It simply continues, generation by generation, copying and occasionally modifying the ancient instructions that keep life flowing forward through time. For more than 1 billion years after Luca established the basic rules of cellular life, evolution seemed content to explore the possibilities within those rules without dramatic innovation. Single-celled organisms diversified into countless forms, each finding their own way to make a living in Earth's waters. Some learned to eat sunlight, becoming the first photosynthetic organisms. Others became expert recyclers, breaking down the waste products of their neighbors. Still others became tiny predators, developing the first primitive hunting strategies. All of this experimentation was happening at a pace that makes the gradual movement of continents seem rushed by comparison. Individual lineages might go millions of years with only the smallest modifications, fine-tuning their molecular machinery with the patience of a master craftsperson perfecting their art. But evolution was also preparing for something extraordinary. All of this single-celled experimentation was like a vast library of biological innovations being compiled, tested, and refined. Different lineages were solving different aspects of the challenge of being alive. How to capture energy, how to build complex molecules, how to protect against damage, how to reproduce reliably, how to respond to changes in the environment. This library of biological innovations would eventually make possible the next great chapter in life's story, the evolution of complex, multicellular organisms. But even that remarkable development was built entirely on the foundation that Luca had established. The genetic code remained the same. The basic cellular machinery remained the same. The fundamental approach to metabolism, reproduction, and inheritance remained the same. What changed was organization. The way individual cells learned to work together, to specialize, to coordinate their activities in service of larger, more complex forms of life. But even this capacity for cooperation and specialization was an extension of principles that had been present from the very beginning, when early life forms freely shared genetic innovations with their neighbors. As you settle deeper into whatever comfortable position you've found for listening to this story, take a moment to marvel at what you are. You are not just a product of the last few thousand years of human culture, or even the last few million years of human evolution. You are the current expression of an unbroken chain of life that stretches back to the very beginning, to those first replicating molecules learning to dance in ancient seas. Every cell in your body carries the molecular signature of that ancient heritage. The DNA in your skin cells, your brain cells, your heart cells. It's all written in the same four-letter alphabet that Luca's community first established. The proteins that allow you to see, to think, to feel, to love, they're all built according to instructions that are variations on themes first explored billions of years ago. When you look at your hands right now, perhaps holding a cup of tea, or resting on a soft pillow, or simply folded peacefully in your lap, you're seeing the current expression of a biological architecture that has been continuously inhabited for nearly 4 billion years. The same cellular machinery that powered the very first life is working right now in every fingertip, every knuckle, every tiny capillary carrying blood beneath your skin. Your ability to extract energy from food, to repair damage to your tissues, to fight off infections, to grow and heal and adapt. All of this uses molecular tools that were first developed by Luca's community and then passed down, generation by generation, parent to child, through every single one of your ancestors, stretching back through the entire history of life on Earth. But perhaps most remarkably, you've inherited not just the molecular machinery of life, but also its fundamental creativity. Evolution is, at its heart, a creative process, constantly experimenting with new possibilities, new combinations, new solutions to the challenges of existence. And that creativity didn't stop with the development of complex organisms or even with the evolution of consciousness. That same creative force that first whispered, "I will continue," in ancient seas, is still active in you today. It's present in your capacity for learning and growth, in your ability to adapt to new situations, in your talent for innovation and problem solving. It's even present in your ability to lie quietly in the darkness, listening to a story about your own deep history, finding comfort and wonder in understanding your place in the vast community of life. Now, as we prepare to drift forward in time to explore how Luca's singular success story became the magnificent diversity of life we see today, let's take one more moment to appreciate the foundation that was established in those ancient seas. Luca didn't just give us the molecular tools for being alive, though that gift alone would be extraordinary enough. Luca also established the basic principles that would guide all future evolution: the importance of both stability and flexibility, the power of cooperation alongside competition, the creative potential that emerges when simple components are organized in complex ways. These principles are still at work today, not just in the biological world, but in the way ecosystems function, the way societies develop, even in the way individual minds learn and grow. The same fundamental patterns that allowed Luca's community to thrive in ancient seas continue to shape the world around you today. As you breathe quietly in whatever peaceful space you've chosen for this journey through deep time, you might sense some of these ancient patterns still at work. The way your body automatically adjusts your breathing and heart rate as you relax. The way your mind naturally seeks understanding and connection, even with concepts as vast and remote as the origins of life itself. the way you can find comfort in recognizing your place in a story much larger than any individual lifetime. All of this, your capacity for rest and wonder, your ability to find meaning in scientific discovery, your sense of connection to the living world around you, all of this is part of the inheritance you received from Luca, refined and elaborated over billions of years of patient evolution. So when you look at your hands right now, you're not just seeing the product of your recent personal history or even your family's genetic heritage. You're seeing the current expression of the same cellular machinery that powered the very first life, the same genetic code that has been continuously copied and carefully preserved since life first learned to say, "I will continue," in Earth's ancient seas. The story of how that single, ancient success story became the magnificent diversity of life we see today. How one became many, how simple became complex, how cooperation and competition together sculpted the beautiful, intricate web of relationships that connects every living thing. That's the story we'll explore together as we continue our gentle journey through the history of life on Earth. But that story, wonderful as it will be, rests entirely on this foundation: the quiet, patient work of Luca's community, establishing the basic rules and tools that would make all future life possible. Tonight, as you rest in the embrace of that ancient heritage, supported by molecular machinery that has been working continuously for nearly 4 billion years, carried forward by the same creative force that first stirred in warm, shallow seas under an alien sky and whispered the words that began it all. I will continue. Let's continue our gentle drift through deep time, carrying with us that sense of connection to Luca and those first successful communities of life. We've established our roots in ancient seas, understood the fundamental language that all life still speaks today. Now, as we move forward perhaps 1 billion years from Luca's time, we come to one of the most fascinating chapters in life's long story. A moment when life stood at a crossroads and chose not one path, but two. Picture yourself standing at a peaceful fork in a forest trail. You know that feeling, don't you? That moment of gentle decision where you might wonder which path will lead to the most beautiful views, which one will take you where you're meant to go. Life faced a similar choice, though it took millions of generations to fully realize what was happening. And unlike a hiker who must choose just one trail, life was generous enough to explore both paths, creating two magnificent ways of being alive that still flourish all around you today. This is the story of the great prokaryote-eukaryote split, life's first major branching, when simple became complex, and one ancient lineage gave birth to two fundamentally different approaches to the art of being alive. It's a story of patience and partnership, of cellular cooperation and evolutionary innovation. And it's a story that's still being written in every breath you take, every beat of your heart, every thought that drifts through your mind as you settle deeper into this quiet evening. Around 2 to 3 billion years ago, life faced its first truly major decision point. Not a conscious choice, of course. Evolution doesn't plan ahead or make deliberate decisions. But over countless generations, the descendants of Luca's community began to diverge along two distinctly different paths, each following its own approach to the fundamental challenge of staying alive in an ever-changing world. Think of it like two siblings raised in the same household who grow up to live completely different lives. One might become a world traveler, collecting experiences and complexity, building elaborate networks of relationships and pursuing ambitious dreams. The other might choose to stay close to home, perfecting a simpler way of life, becoming deeply skilled at a few essential things rather than trying to master everything. Both choices are valid. Both can lead to success and fulfillment. And both, in the story of life, have proven to be profoundly successful strategies that continue to flourish today. The first path, the one chosen by what we now call prokaryotes, was essentially a decision to stick with what worked. These descendants of Luca kept their cellular architecture elegantly simple. No internal compartments, no complex internal structures, just the essential ingredients for life contained within a flexible cell membrane. Their genetic material floated freely in the cell, accessible and ready for action. Their metabolic machinery was streamlined, efficient, adaptable. This might sound like the boring choice, but it was actually a stroke of evolutionary genius. By keeping things simple, prokaryotes became incredibly versatile. They could adapt quickly to new environments, reproduce rapidly when conditions were favorable, and survive in places that would be absolutely impossible for more complex organisms. The prokaryotes split into two main groups that we now call bacteria and archaea. Think of them as cousins who chose slightly different versions of the simple life. Bacteria became the ultimate generalists, figuring out how to make a living in almost every environment on Earth. Some learned to eat sunlight, others learned to digest chemicals that would be toxic to most life forms. Some became essential partners with more complex organisms, others became fierce competitors or even predators in the microscopic world. Archaea, meanwhile, became the extremophiles, the organisms that chose to specialize in life's most challenging environments. They learned to thrive in boiling hot springs, in waters so salty they would kill most other life, in environments so acidic they would dissolve metal. They became life's pioneers, proving that with the right biochemical innovations, even the most hostile environments could become home. Both bacteria and archaea remain wildly successful today. In fact, they're so successful that they vastly outnumber all other forms of life on Earth. The bacteria in your gut alone outnumber all the stars in the Milky Way galaxy. Every handful of soil contains billions of these microscopic organisms, each one a direct descendant of those early prokaryotes who chose the path of elegant simplicity. As you breathe quietly right now, you're participating in cycles that depend entirely on prokaryotic innovation. The nitrogen that's essential for building proteins in your body was fixed from atmospheric nitrogen by bacteria. The oxygen you're breathing was first produced by ancient cyanobacteria who learned to harvest energy from sunlight. Even the breakdown of organic matter that keeps nutrients cycling through ecosystems, that's primarily the work of bacteria and archaea, still using metabolic pathways they perfected billions of years ago. But let's turn our attention now to that other path, the one that led to what we call eukaryotic cells, the complex cells that make up your body and the bodies of all plants, animals, fungi, and many microscopic organisms. This was life's first great experiment with complexity, and it required one of the most remarkable innovations in the entire history of life, the art of cellular cooperation. The story of the eukaryotic cell is fundamentally a story about partnership. Imagine, if you will, a world where individual success sometimes comes not from competition, but from learning to live together, to specialize, to divide labor in ways that benefit everyone involved. This is exactly what happened in one of evolution's most beautiful and successful experiments. The first step toward eukaryotic complexity was architectural. Early eukaryotic ancestors developed something that prokaryotes had never tried: internal compartmentalization. Instead of keeping all their cellular machinery mixed together in one space, they began building internal membranes, creating specialized compartments within the cell. Picture this like the difference between living in a studio apartment and living in a house with many rooms. In the studio apartment, like a prokaryotic cell, everything happens in the same space. You sleep, cook, work, and relax all in one room. It's efficient, economical, and it works perfectly well for many people. But there are advantages to having separate rooms for different activities. You can have a quiet bedroom for rest, a kitchen designed specifically for cooking, a study where you can focus on work without distractions. Eukaryotic cells developed the cellular equivalent of this room-based architecture. They evolved a nucleus, a specialized compartment where genetic material could be stored and protected, like a library with its own climate-controlled room. They developed other internal structures too: an endoplasmic reticulum for protein synthesis and modification, a Golgi apparatus for packaging and shipping cellular products, lysosomes for waste disposal and recycling. But the most remarkable innovation in eukaryotic cell architecture came through a process that scientists call endosymbiosis, literally living together inside. This is where our story becomes truly extraordinary, because it's a story about one cell inviting another cell to come live inside, beginning a partnership so successful that it's been maintained for over 1 billion years. Around 1.5 to 2 billion years ago, some early eukaryotic cells encountered certain bacteria that had developed something precious: the ability to use oxygen to extract enormous amounts of energy from organic molecules. Oxygen was still relatively new in Earth's atmosphere at this time, a waste product of photosynthetic bacteria that was gradually building up and changing the chemistry of the planet. Most organisms at this time found oxygen to be toxic, It was a reactive, dangerous chemical that could damage cellular components if not handled carefully. But some bacteria had learned to tame oxygen, to use its reactive power as a tool rather than suffer it as a poison. These bacteria had essentially learned to breathe, to use oxygen to burn fuel much more efficiently than any previous form of life. Now, here's where the story becomes almost unbelievable. Instead of competing with these oxygen-breathing bacteria, some early eukaryotic cells did something unprecedented. They invited the bacteria inside. They engulfed them, but instead of digesting them as food, they offered them protection and nutrients in exchange for energy. It was life's first corporate merger, and it was wildly successful. These bacterial partners, which we now call mitochondria, took up residence inside their host cells and never left. Over millions of generations, they gradually gave up their independence, transferring most of their genes to their host cell's nucleus, streamlining their own genomes to focus solely on their specialized job, converting oxygen and organic molecules into usable cellular energy. Today, every cell in your body contains hundreds or even thousands of these ancient bacterial partners. Your mitochondria are the descendants of those first bacteria who chose cooperation over independence, partnership over solitary survival. They're working right now as you listen to this story, converting the oxygen you breathe and the nutrients from your last meal into the energy that powers your thoughts, your heartbeat, your ability to maintain body temperature on a cool evening. The remarkable thing is that mitochondria still retain some of their bacterial characteristics. They have their own DNA, separate from the DNA in your cell nucleus. They reproduce independently, dividing when the cell needs more energy production. In many ways, you can think of yourself not as a single organism, but as a walking ecosystem, a collaboration between your human cells and the billions of bacterial descendants that power every aspect of your existence. This partnership was so successful that it became one of the defining characteristics of complex life. Almost all eukaryotic organisms, from the tiniest single-celled protist to the largest blue whale, carry mitochondria inherited from that first ancient partnership. The energy that powers a hummingbird's rapid wing beat, the massive brain of an elephant, the bioluminescent glow of a deep-sea jellyfish. It all comes from the same bacterial partners that first learned to cooperate with eukaryotic cells billions of years ago. But the story of eukaryotic partnership doesn't end with mitochondria. Some early eukaryotic cells encountered another group of bacteria that had mastered an even more remarkable skill: the ability to capture energy directly from sunlight. These were the cyanobacteria, the first organisms to perfect photosynthesis, the miraculous process of converting light, carbon dioxide and water into organic molecules and oxygen. Once again, instead of simply competing with these photosynthetic bacteria, some eukaryotic cells chose partnership. They invited cyanobacteria inside, offering them protection and a stable environment in exchange for the ability to make their own food from sunlight. These bacterial partners, which we now call chloroplasts, became the foundation of plant life on Earth. Every leaf that catches sunlight, every blade of grass, every towering tree, every delicate flower, they're all powered by the descendants of those ancient cyanobacteria who chose to live inside eukaryotic cells. Like mitochondria, chloroplasts retained some of their bacterial independence. They have their own DNA, their own reproduction cycle, their own specialized structures for capturing and converting light energy. When you look at a green plant, you're seeing the visible result of this ancient partnership. The green color comes from chlorophyll, the molecular machinery that chloroplasts use to harvest photons from the sunday. This partnership gave eukaryotic cells access to an essentially unlimited energy source. Instead of having to hunt for food or compete for limited nutrients, cells with chloroplasts could simply spread themselves toward the light and manufacture their own sustenance. It was like learning to live off the grid, becoming energy independent in the most elegant way possible. The impact of this partnership extends far beyond the plant kingdom. Every breath you take contains oxygen produced by chloroplasts. Every meal you eat is ultimately powered by photosynthesis. Even if you're eating meat, that animal ate plants, or ate animals that ate plants, tracing back to the energy originally captured from sunlight by chloroplasts. As you sit quietly this evening, perhaps near a window where plants are resting in the darkness, you're surrounded by the descendants of that ancient partnership. The houseplants on your windowsill, the trees visible outside, even the wooden furniture around you, all of it represents the ongoing success of that first collaboration between eukaryotic cells and photosynthetic bacteria. The development of eukaryotic cells through endosymbiosis represents one of evolution's most profound innovations, the discovery that complexity can emerge through cooperation rather than just through competition. By inviting bacterial partners inside, early eukaryotic cells gained access to sophisticated biochemical capabilities that would have taken millions of years to evolve independently. This principle, that cooperation can be a more powerful driver of innovation than competition alone, became one of the fundamental themes of complex life. It's visible today in the way your gut bacteria help you digest food, in the way flowering plants partner with pollinating insects, in the way fungal networks connect and support entire forest ecosystems. Your own body is a testament to the power of this cooperative approach. You are not just human cells arranged in a human form. You are a community, human cells working together with bacterial partners, all of it coordinated by genetic programs that evolved through billions of years of trial and cooperation. Your digestive system depends on bacterial partners to break down certain nutrients. Your immune system has learned to distinguish between helpful bacterial partners and potentially harmful invaders. Even your mood and mental health are influenced by the bacterial communities living in your gut. This cooperative complexity made possible innovations that would have been impossible for simple prokaryotic cells. The ability to grow large while maintaining efficient metabolism. The capacity for specialized cell types that could divide labor. Some cells focused on structure, others on movement, others on information processing. The development of complex life cycles with sexual reproduction, allowing for rapid genetic innovation and adaptation. Most remarkably, this cellular complexity eventually made possible the evolution of multicellular organisms, communities of eukaryotic cells working together in even larger and more sophisticated partnerships. From this foundation would eventually emerge all the complex life we see around us: plants and animals, fungi and protists, the entire visible world of forests and gardens, oceans and meadows. As you rest there in the quiet of this evening, let yourself appreciate the vast patience that made all of this possible. The transition from simple prokaryotic cells to complex eukaryotic cells didn't happen quickly by any measure we might use to judge change in our daily lives. We're talking about innovations that unfolded over hundreds of millions of years, refined through countless generations of gradual improvement. For more than 1 billion years after eukaryotic cells first evolved, they remained mostly single-celled. They experimented with their new complexity, explored the possibilities of their partnerships with mitochondria and chloroplasts, gradually developed more sophisticated internal architecture and more efficient cellular processes. They were learning to be patient, perfecting the art of simply being. This might seem like a period of stasis, but it was actually a time of profound innovation happening at the cellular level. Early eukaryotes were developing the molecular tools that would eventually make multicellular life possible. They were evolving more sophisticated ways to control gene expression, allowing different cells to use the same genetic information in different ways. They were developing more complex systems for cellular communication, enabling cells to coordinate their activities. They were refining sexual reproduction, creating new ways to combine genetic material and accelerate evolutionary innovation. All of this preparatory work was happening invisibly in microscopic organisms living in ancient seas. No external observer would have noticed anything dramatic occurring, but this hidden complexity was laying the foundation for everything that would follow. Every plant and animal, every ecosystem, every garden you've ever enjoyed, every pet you've ever loved, every natural landscape that has ever taken your breath away. The patience of evolution during this period offers a gentle lesson for our own lives. Sometimes the most important work happens slowly, invisibly, in the quiet spaces where we're simply learning to be. Sometimes the greatest innovations come not from dramatic breakthroughs but from countless small improvements, gradual refinements, steady progress towards something we can't yet fully imagine. As you breathe quietly, as your heart beats its steady rhythm, as your mitochondria convert oxygen into energy, and your cells repair and maintain themselves while you rest, you're participating in processes that were refined over billions of years of patient evolution. The complexity that makes your life possible emerged gradually, through countless generations of organisms that simply focused on doing their work well, passing on their innovations to their descendants, contributing their small part to the larger story of life's unfolding creativity. The story of the prokaryote-eukaryote split is not just ancient history, it's a living reality that shapes every moment of your existence. Right now, as you listen to these words, prokaryotic and eukaryotic innovations are working together to keep you alive. The bacteria in your digestive system, direct descendants of those early prokaryotes who chose the path of elegant simplicity, are helping you extract nutrients from food, producing vitamins your body needs, protecting you from harmful microorganisms. They've maintained their ancestral flexibility and efficiency, adapting quickly to changes in your diet and environment. Meanwhile, your own cells, with their complex internal architecture and their partnerships with mitochondria, are managing the sophisticated coordination required for multicellular life. Your nervous system is processing sensory information and generating thoughts. Your immune system is monitoring for threats and maintaining health. Your muscular system is maintaining posture and enabling movement. Your cardiovascular system is delivering oxygen and nutrients to every cell in your body. All of this depends on that ancient branching, that moment when life chose to explore two different paths to success. The prokaryotic path gave us versatility, efficiency, and the ability to thrive in almost any environment. The eukaryotic path gave us complexity, cooperation, and the ability to create increasingly sophisticated forms of organization. Both paths remain wildly successful today. In terms of sheer numbers and biomass, prokaryotes still dominate the planet. But in terms of visible complexity and the kinds of innovations that capture our imagination, consciousness, communication, artistic creation, the capacity for wonder itself, the eukaryotic path has opened up possibilities that continue to amaze us. And the beautiful thing is that these two paths are not separate or competing. They're deeply intertwined, supporting each other in countless ways. Your life depends on both prokaryotic efficiency and eukaryotic complexity. The ecosystems around you require both simple bacterial processes and complex multicellular interactions. The planet's climate and chemistry are regulated by both ancient prokaryotic cycles and newer eukaryotic innovations. As you settle deeper into rest this evening, you might take a moment to appreciate your place in this ongoing collaboration. You are simultaneously a community of cooperating cells and a participant in larger communities of cooperating organisms. You carry within your body the innovations of both evolutionary paths, the elegant simplicity of your bacterial partners, and the sophisticated complexity of your eukaryotic inheritance. This is the foundation upon which all the rest of life's story builds. From this point forward, in our journey through evolutionary time, we'll explore how eukaryotic complexity eventually gave rise to multicellular organisms, how those organisms diversified into the magnificent variety of life we see today. But always, underneath it all, will be these fundamental innovations, the prokaryotic mastery of simple efficiency and the eukaryotic discovery of cooperative complexity. Sleep well tonight, knowing that you are the current expression of both paths, the living embodiment of life's first great branching, carried forward by the same patient creativity that first whispered, "I will continue," in ancient seas and then learned to say, "We will continue together," in the first partnerships between cells. The story continues, in you, through you, as you, in every breath and every heartbeat and every moment of quiet wonder at the magnificent complexity that makes your existence possible. As we continue our gentle drift through the story of life, let's pause for a moment and simply breathe. Feel the air flowing into your lungs, filling you with the oxygen that keeps every cell in your body humming with quiet energy. Now, as you slowly exhale, consider this. Every molecule of that life-giving oxygen was a gift from a plant. Somewhere, perhaps in a forest miles from where you're resting tonight, or maybe from a houseplant sitting quietly on a nearby windowsill, green leaves caught sunlight today and transformed it into the very breath you're taking right now. This is where our story takes us next, into the green world, the realm of plants and their quiet partners, the fungi. These are the garden branches of life's great tree, the lineages that learned to reach in two directions at once, upward toward the light and downward into the patient darkness of soil and decay. Together, they created the living systems that make our world habitable, that fill our air with oxygen and our soil with nutrients, that paint our landscapes with every shade of green and brown and gold. It's a story that unfolds around you every day, in every garden you pass, every tree that offers shade, every mushroom that appears after rain. But tonight, in the quiet darkness, let's explore the deeper history of this partnership, how life learned to eat sunlight, how it discovered the art of gentle decay, and how plants and fungi together began the ancient conversation between earth and sky that continues in every breath you take. Imagine for a moment what it would be like to live entirely on light, not just to enjoy sunshine the way we do, feeling its warmth on our skin, appreciating its brightness and beauty, but to actually feed on light itself, to convert photons directly into the energy needed for growth, reproduction, and all the quiet work of staying alive. This sounds like something from a fairy tale, but it's exactly what plants learn to do through one of evolution's most elegant innovations, photosynthesis. It's been called life's greatest magic trick, and for good reason. Through photosynthesis, plants take ingredients that seem almost impossibly simple: light from the sun, carbon dioxide from the air, water from the soil, and weave them together into complex organic molecules, releasing oxygen as a kind of generous bonus gift to the rest of the living world. The story of photosynthesis begins long before what we think of as plants existed. As we explored in our last chapter, the first photosynthetic organisms were cyanobacteria, those remarkable prokaryotes who first learned to harness the sun's energy. But around 1.5 billion years ago, when early eukaryotic cells invited these photosynthetic bacteria inside as permanent partners, something extraordinary became possible. The first plant-like organisms were simple, single-celled creatures floating in ancient seas. They looked nothing like the roses in your garden or the oak trees lining your street, but they carried within them the same fundamental innovation, those bacterial partners, now called chloroplasts, working tirelessly to convert sunlight into sustenance. For hundreds of millions of years, these early plants remained aquatic, content to drift in warm, shallow seas where sunlight could easily reach them. The ocean was their garden, and they flourished there, gradually becoming more complex, developing new strategies for capturing light and processing nutrients. But then, around 450 million years ago, some of these aquatic plants began to face a challenge that would change the world. The shorelines were becoming increasingly crowded. Competition for space and light in the shallow waters was intensifying. Some lineages responded to this pressure by doing something that had never been attempted before in the history of life. They began to explore the possibility of living on land. This was an extraordinarily brave evolutionary experiment. Land in those days was a harsh, alien environment. There was no soil as we know it, just bare rock and sand. The air was thin and dry compared to the supportive embrace of water. There were no other complex organisms on land to provide food or partnership. It was essentially a biological desert. But those early plants possessed something that made this impossible journey possible. Their partnership with chloroplasts meant they could manufacture their own food as long as they had access to sunlight, carbon dioxide, and water. They didn't need to hunt or scavenge or compete for limited nutrients. They just needed to figure out how to survive in this new, challenging environment. The transition to land required countless innovations. Plants had to develop waterproof surfaces to prevent desiccation in the dry air. They had to create structural support systems, roots and stems and eventually wood, to hold themselves upright without the buoyant support of water. They had to develop specialized tissues for transporting water from roots to leaves, and for distributing the sugar they manufactured through photosynthesis to all parts of their increasingly complex bodies. Each of these innovations took millions of years to perfect, countless generations of gradual refinement and improvement. But slowly, persistently, plants began to transform the terrestrial world. They created the first soils by breaking down rock with their roots and enriching the resulting debris with their own organic matter. They began to moderate the climate, creating humid microclimates where other organisms could eventually thrive. Most importantly, they continued their generous production of oxygen, gradually building up the atmosphere that would eventually support all the air-breathing life we see today. As plants diversified and spread across the land, they developed increasingly sophisticated strategies for capturing and using sunlight. Some grew tall to overtop their competitors, the first trees reaching toward the sky with trunks that were marvels of biological engineering. Others specialized in efficiency, developing leaves of different shapes and sizes, optimized for different light conditions. The leaves themselves became exquisite solar panels, equipped with millions of tiny chloroplasts, each one a descendant of those ancient cyanobacteria, still faithfully converting photons into chemical energy. The green color that we associate with plant life is actually the signature of chlorophyll, the molecular machinery that captures light energy, a visible reminder of that ancient partnership between eukaryotic cells and photosynthetic bacteria. Trees, in particular, became living monuments to the power of patience and persistence. As they grew, they recorded the story of their lives in annual growth rings, each ring representing a year of steady growth, a season of capturing sunlight and converting it into wood and leaves and seeds. When you look at the cross-section of a tree trunk, you're seeing a timeline written in living tissue. Each ring is a year the earth remembers, a record of sunny seasons and difficult ones, of abundant rainfall and times of drought. The oldest living trees on earth have been quietly growing for thousands of years, some of them already ancient when human civilizations were just beginning. They are living libraries, their rings recording centuries of climate history, their very existence a testament to the steady, patient work of photosynthesis, the daily miracle of converting sunlight into life. But while plants were learning to reach toward the light, another group of organisms was mastering an equally important skill, the art of reaching into darkness. These were the fungi, life's quiet specialists in decomposition and recycling, the essential partners who learned to find nourishment in the places where other organisms saw only waste and decay. Fungi occupy a unique position in the tree of life. They're not plants, they can't photosynthesize and must obtain their energy by consuming organic matter created by other organisms. But they're not animals either. They don't move around hunting for food, but instead grow through their environment, extending thread-like structures called hyphae through soil and wood and organic matter, secreting enzymes that break down complex molecules into simpler nutrients they can absorb. Think of fungi as life's recycling specialists, the organisms that whisper to every fallen leaf, every piece of dead wood, every bit of organic waste. Your story doesn't end here. Let me help you become something new. Without fungi, the world would be buried under accumulating layers of dead plant and animal matter. Nutrients would remain locked up in complex organic molecules, unavailable to living organisms. The cycles that keep ecosystems healthy and productive would grind to a halt. But fungi do much more than simply clean up organic debris. They've become the internet of the forest floor, creating vast networks of microscopic threads that connect different plants and facilitate communication and resource sharing across entire ecosystems. These fungal networks, sometimes called mycorrhizal networks or the wood wide web, represent one of nature's most sophisticated information and resource sharing systems. Individual fungal organisms can extend their thread-like hyphae across vast distances, sometimes covering acres of forest floor, creating living networks that connect hundreds or even thousands of plants. Through these networks, plants can share resources in ways that seem almost miraculous. A tree growing in a sunny clearing can send excess sugar, produced through photosynthesis, to another tree growing in deep shade that's struggling to get enough light. In return, the shaded tree might share minerals or water that it has better access to. Seedlings, too small to compete effectively for resources, can be supported by mature trees through the fungal network until they're large enough to contribute to the community. The fungi themselves benefit from these partnerships by receiving a steady supply of the sugars that plants produce through photosynthesis. It's a three-way partnership: plants trading with fungi connecting plants to each other, everyone benefiting in ways that wouldn't be possible in isolation. Recent research has revealed that these fungal networks can even carry information. When a plant is attacked by insects or diseases, it can send chemical signals through the fungal network to warn neighboring plants, allowing them to begin producing defensive compounds before they're actually attacked. It's as if the forest has its own communication system, mediated by the quiet, invisible work of fungi growing in the darkness below ground. The fungal network represents a fundamentally different approach to survival than the competitive model we often imagine. Instead of each organism fighting alone for limited resources, the fungal network creates a system where cooperation and resource sharing benefit everyone involved. Stronger, well-established plants support struggling newcomers. Different species with different strengths contribute to a shared resource pool. Information flows freely, helping the entire community respond more effectively to threats and opportunities. This cooperative model extends beyond just plants and fungi. Many of the mushrooms you see sprouting from forest floors or appearing in your garden after rain are just the visible fruiting bodies of vast underground fungal networks. These mushrooms are like the apples on an apple tree, the reproductive structures of organisms whose main bodies exist as invisible networks of threads spreading through soil and organic matter. When you walk through a forest, you're walking above one of the most complex and sophisticated biological networks on Earth. Every step you take passes over thousands of miles of fungal threads, connecting countless plants in an ongoing conversation about resources, threats, and opportunities. It's a reminder that the natural world is far more interconnected and cooperative than we often realize. The relationship between plants and fungi represents one of evolution's most successful and enduring partnerships. This collaboration is so fundamental to terrestrial life that most plants literally cannot survive without their fungal partners. Over 90% of plant species form mycorrhizal associations, intimate partnerships with fungi that colonize their root systems. To understand how remarkable this partnership is, imagine trying to live in a world where you could only absorb nutrients that happen to come into direct contact with your skin. That's essentially the challenge that plant roots face. Roots can only absorb nutrients from the tiny volume of soil that's in immediate contact with their surface. For a plant trying to gather all the phosphorus, nitrogen, and other essential minerals it needs from soil, this is a severe limitation. Fungi solve this problem elegantly. Their thread-like hyphae are much thinner than plant roots and can extend much farther, creating a vast network that increases the plant's effective absorptive surface by hundreds or even thousands of times. It's like giving the plant a massively expanded root system that can reach nutrients the plant could never access on its own. In exchange for this service, plants provide fungi with something they can't produce themselves: the sugars created through photosynthesis. This trade relationship, minerals from the fungi in exchange for sugars from the plants, has been going on for over 400 million years, since plants first began colonizing land. This partnership was probably essential for making terrestrial life possible. The early soils of ancient Earth were nutrient-poor and difficult for plants to exploit on their own. By partnering with fungi, early land plants gained access to the mineral resources they needed to grow and reproduce in this challenging new environment. In return, they provided fungi with a reliable source of energy-rich compounds. The partnership between plants and fungi continues to shape the world around you today. The vegetables in your kitchen garden, the flowers in your yard, the trees lining your street, almost all of them are engaged in this ancient collaboration with soil fungi. When you water your plants or add compost to your garden, you're not just feeding the plants themselves, you're also nourishing the fungal partners that make healthy plant growth possible. This partnership extends far beyond simple nutrient exchange. Mycorrhizal fungi can help plants resist diseases, tolerate drought, stress, and survive in contaminated soils. They can improve soil structure, creating better conditions for both plants and the countless other organisms that depend on healthy soil ecosystems. The more we learn about plant-fungi partnerships, the more we realize how essential they are to the health of entire ecosystems. Forests with intact mycorrhizal networks are more resilient to drought, disease, and other stresses. Agricultural systems that preserve soil fungi are more productive and sustainable. Even in urban environments, supporting the fungal partners of trees and other plants is crucial for maintaining healthy green spaces. As you breathe quietly in whatever peaceful space you've chosen for tonight's journey, take a moment to appreciate the profound conversation happening all around you, the ancient dialogue between plants and the atmosphere that has been continuing for hundreds of millions of years. Every breath you take is participating in this conversation. The oxygen flowing into your lungs was released by plants during photosynthesis, when they split water molecules to extract the hydrogen they needed for building organic compounds. The carbon dioxide you exhale will be captured by plants tomorrow. incorporated into new leaves and stems and roots through that same miraculous process of photosynthesis. This gas exchange, oxygen and carbon dioxide flowing back and forth between plants and the atmosphere, is one of the fundamental cycles that keeps our planet habitable. Plants have been steadily enriching the atmosphere with oxygen for billions of years, creating the air that makes complex, multicellular life possible. At the same time, they've been removing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, helping to regulate Earth's climate. The partnership between plants and fungi has been essential to maintaining this atmospheric conversation. Healthy soils, rich with fungal networks, can store enormous amounts of carbon removed from the atmosphere by plants. Forest ecosystems, supported by mycorrhizal partnerships, are among the most effective systems on Earth for capturing and storing atmospheric carbon. Even the water cycle is influenced by this plant-fungi partnership. Plants draw water up from deep in the soil through their roots, then release it into the atmosphere through their leaves in a process called transpiration. This water vapor becomes clouds, which bring rain to distant regions. Healthy fungal networks in soil help retain moisture and support this crucial movement of water from earth to sky. As you settle deeper into rest tonight, you might sense some of these ancient rhythms still at work around you. If there are plants in your room, they're quietly continuing their photosynthetic work even in the darkness, using stored energy to maintain themselves and prepare for tomorrow's renewed conversation with sunlight. The soil in your garden, if you have one, is alive with fungal networks that never stop their patient work of connecting, recycling, and supporting the community of life above ground. The oxygen you're breathing carries the signature of this partnership, evidence of countless plants and their fungal allies working together to create and maintain the conditions that make your life possible. The very air you breathe is a gift from the garden branches of life's tree, a reminder of how deeply interconnected we are with the green world that surrounds us. This partnership between plants and fungi offers a beautiful model for thinking about cooperation and community in our own lives. Like the mycorrhizal networks that connect forest trees, human communities thrive when they find ways to share resources, communicate effectively, and support their most vulnerable members. The same principles that make forest ecosystems resilient, diversity, cooperation, patient investment in long-term relationships, can guide us in creating healthier, more sustainable human communities. Tonight, as you prepare for sleep, you rest supported by the patient work of plants and fungi that has been continuing for hundreds of millions of years. The oxygen in your bloodstream, the stable climate that makes your comfortable evening possible, the food that nourished you today, all of it depends on the ongoing partnership between life's sun catchers and its quiet recyclers, the organisms that learn to reach simultaneously toward light and darkness, creating the living systems that sustain our beautiful, interconnected world. Sleep well, knowing that you are held in the embrace of these ancient partnerships, supported by the generosity of plants that give freely of their oxygen and the patient work of fungi that keep nutrients cycling through the living world. Tomorrow, when you see sunlight filtering through leaves or notice mushrooms appearing after rain, you'll carry with you a deeper appreciation for the quiet miracles that make every breath possible, the ancient conversation between earth and sky that continues in every garden, every forest, every moment of green and growing life. Close your eyes for a moment and become aware of your body resting in whatever comfortable position you've chosen for tonight's journey. Feel the gentle rise and fall of your chest as you breathe. Notice how your heart beats steadily, pumping warm blood through vessels that reach every part of your body. Perhaps shift slightly, adjusting your position for greater comfort. These simple movements, breathing, the circulation of blood, the ability to move and adjust and seek comfort, these are the gifts of the animal branches of life's great tree. Tonight, we turn our attention to the lineages that learned something remarkable. How to move through the world with intention. How to seek what they needed rather than simply waiting for it to come to them. This is the story of animals. Our own branch of the evolutionary tree. The moving cousins who learned to wander, to hunt, to flee, to dance, and eventually to dream. It's a story that lives in your body right now. Every breath you take uses muscles that evolved for movement. Every heartbeat pumps blood through a circulatory system that first developed to supply the energy needs of active, mobile organisms. Even your nervous system, the remarkable network that allows you to think and feel and experience wonder at stories like this one, first evolved to coordinate movement, to help early animals navigate their world with purpose and precision. As we drift through this chapter of life's story, from the first tentative movements in ancient seas to the warm-blooded creativity of our mammalian heritage, let yourself appreciate the deep continuity that connects you to every animal that has ever lived. You are the current expression of innovations that began with the first creatures to push themselves through primordial waters, refined by countless generations of ancestors who learned to swim and crawl and walk and run, all leading to this moment when you can choose to lie still and listen to the story of your own remarkable heritage. Imagine the ocean as it was around 600 million years ago, a vast, living soup teeming with microscopic life, but eerily quiet by the standards we know today. No whale songs echoing through the depths, no schools of fish flashing silver in the sunlight, no crabs scuttling across the seafloor. The most complex organisms were still mostly single-celled, drifting with the currents, absorbing nutrients from their surroundings, reproducing when conditions were favorable. But somewhere in those ancient seas, something extraordinary was beginning to happen. Some descendants of those complex eukaryotic cells we explored in earlier chapters were starting to experiment with a radically new way of being alive. They were learning to stick together after cell division, to coordinate their activities, to specialize for different functions while remaining part of a larger whole. These were the first animals. Not animals as we might recognize them today, but the earliest experiments in multicellular cooperation and, eventually, movement. They were probably not much to look at, these pioneer animals. Some might have resembled tiny, shapeless bags of cells floating in the water. Others might have looked like simple crusts growing on rocks or the seafloor. But even these humble beginnings contained the seeds of something revolutionary, the development of different cell types that could work together for the benefit of the whole organism. Some cells specialized in digestion, others in reproduction, still others in providing structure and support, and some, for the first time in the history of life, specialized in movement. The first animals to master movement were probably quite similar to modern sponges and jellyfish. Sponges might seem like unlikely pioneers of animal innovation. They're sessile as adults, attached to surfaces like underwater plants, filtering nutrients from the water that flows through their bodies. But sponges were revolutionary because they were among the first organisms to coordinate the activities of many different cell types, creating a body that was more than the sum of its parts. Jellyfish took this innovation even further. They developed the first nervous systems, simple networks of nerve cells that could coordinate movement across their entire body. When you watch a jellyfish pulsing through the water, you're seeing one of evolution's earliest experiments with intentional, coordinated movement. Those rhythmic contractions that propel the jellyfish forward represent a profound breakthrough. The ability to move not just in response to external forces like currents and waves, but according to internal signals generated by the animal's own nervous system. These early nervous systems were simple by modern standards, nothing like the complex brain that's processing these words right now. But they established the fundamental principle that would guide all future animal evolution. The idea that an organism could gather information about its environment, process that information, and use it to coordinate beneficial behaviors. With this innovation, life crossed a threshold. For the first time, organisms could seek out favorable conditions rather than simply enduring whatever conditions they found themselves in. They could move toward food, away from danger, toward potential mates. They could, in a very real sense, begin to author their own stories, rather than simply being passive characters in the larger story of their environment. Around 540 million years ago, this gradual experimentation with animal body plans suddenly accelerated into one of the most creative periods in the history of life. Paleontologists call it the Cambrian explosion, and it was like watching life suddenly discover an entire art studio full of supplies it had never used before. In a relatively short span of geological time, perhaps 10 or 20 million years, which is the blink of an eye in evolutionary terms, animal life diversified into an astonishing array of forms. It was as if evolution had been sketching quietly in the margins for millions of years and then suddenly decided to fill entire canvases with bold, experimental designs. Some of these Cambrian animals looked like nothing that exists today. Bizarre, wonderful creatures with 5 eyes, or bodies covered in spines, or feeding appendages that seem to have been designed by an alien intelligence. Others established body plans that are still successful today. The segmented bodies of arthropods like insects and crustaceans, the flowing forms of jellyfish and their relatives, the sturdy shells of mollusks. But perhaps the most important innovation of the Cambrian explosion was the development of bilateral symmetry, the body plan that you and I, and most animals still use today. Bilateral symmetry means having a left side and a right side, a front end and a back end, a top and a bottom. It might seem like an obvious way to organize a body, but it was actually a profound innovation that made complex, directed movement possible. Think about your own body for a moment. You have 2 arms, 2 legs, 2 eyes, 2 lungs. You're fundamentally symmetrical along your central axis. This bilateral organization allows you to move forward with purpose and coordination. Your brain can send matching signals to the muscles on both sides of your body, allowing you to walk or run or reach for something with fluid, coordinated movements. This body plan first appeared in those Cambrian seas, in animals that were experimenting with active hunting, with burrowing through sediments, with swimming in pursuit of prey or mates. Bilateral symmetry was the key that unlocked these possibilities, allowing animals to become increasingly sophisticated in their interactions with their environment. The Cambrian explosion also saw the evolution of the first complex sensory systems. Eyes evolved, not just simple light-detecting spots, but sophisticated optical systems that could form images, track movement, judge distances. Some Cambrian animals developed compound eyes with thousands of individual lenses. Others developed simple eyes with focusing lenses remarkably similar to the ones in your own eyes. These sensory innovations transformed the nature of life in the oceans. For the first time, predators could actively hunt prey, and prey could actively flee predators. The evolutionary arms race between hunters and the hunted began in earnest, driving rapid innovations in speed, armor, camouflage, and defensive strategies. By the end of the Cambrian period, the oceans had been transformed from a relatively peaceful realm of filter feeders and grazers into a dynamic, interactive ecosystem full of animals that moved with purpose, hunted with strategy, and responded to their environment with increasing sophistication. Among all the experimental body plans that appeared during the Cambrian explosion, one particular innovation would prove especially significant for our story: the development of a stiff but flexible rod running along the back of certain animals. This was the beginning of the vertebrate story, the lineage that would eventually lead to fish and amphibians, reptiles and birds, mammals, and ultimately, to you. The earliest vertebrates were small, eel-like creatures that swam through Cambrian seas, using undulating movements of their flexible bodies. They weren't much to look at, no jaws, no fins as we know them today, probably spending most of their time filtering small particles from the water or scavenging organic matter from the sea floor. But they possessed something remarkable, that flexible backbone, technically called a notochord, which provided structural support while still allowing the complex, coordinated movements that made efficient swimming possible. This was the innovation that would eventually become your own spine, the central axis around which your entire body is organized. As you sit or lie there listening to this story, take a moment to appreciate your spine. Feel how it supports your posture, how it allows you to hold your head upright, how it forms the central highway for the nerves that connect your brain to every part of your body. That spine is your direct inheritance from those early vertebrates, refined over hundreds of millions of years but still serving the same fundamental purpose, providing flexible support for an active, mobile body. The early vertebrates were so successful that they quickly diversified into an enormous variety of forms. Some developed jaws, a revolutionary innovation that opened up entirely new ways of making a living. Instead of just filtering small particles from the water, jawed fish could bite, tear, and process larger prey. They could become active predators, efficient herbivores, specialized scavengers. Fish with jaws came to dominate the ancient oceans, evolving into forms both familiar and strange. Some became enormous predators with razor-sharp teeth. Others developed heavy armor for protection. Still, others became swift, streamlined hunters that could chase down prey in open water. But perhaps most remarkably, fish developed increasingly sophisticated fins, the appendages that would eventually become the arms and legs of land animals. Fish fins are marvels of biological engineering, capable of providing thrust for swimming, fine control for maneuvering, and even limited support for resting on the bottom. In some lineages of fish, these fins became increasingly robust and muscular, supported by strong internal bones. These fish, the ancestors of all land vertebrates, were probably living in shallow, warm waters where the ability to support their own weight occasionally became useful. Maybe they used their sturdy fins to push through dense vegetation, or to move from one pool to another when water levels dropped, or to rest in very shallow water where their fins touched the bottom. Your arms and legs are the direct descendants of these fish fins. The bones in your hand, from your shoulder blade to your fingertips, correspond precisely to bones that can be found in the fins of certain ancient fish. Your ability to reach for a cup of tea, to turn the pages of a book, to embrace someone you love, all of this traces back to fins that first developed for swimming through ancient seas. Even more remarkably, those early fish were breathing through gills, delicate structures that extracted oxygen from water by passing it over highly vascularized surfaces. The respiratory system you're using right now, as you breathe quietly in the evening air, is a modified version of those ancient gills. Your lungs develop from the same embryonic tissues that become gills in fish. The rhythmic breathing that sustains your life is an echo of the rhythmic pumping of water over gills that sustained your fish ancestors hundreds of millions of years ago. Around 365 million years ago, some of these robust finned fish began to face environmental pressures that would lead to one of the most remarkable transitions in the history of life: the colonization of land by vertebrate animals. Climate changes were causing many aquatic environments to become unstable. Lakes and rivers were drying up seasonally, forcing fish to either perish or find ways to survive in increasingly challenging conditions. Some fish lineages responded to these challenges by developing an extraordinary innovation: the ability to extract oxygen directly from air. They developed primitive lungs alongside their gills, allowing them to survive in oxygen-poor water, or even to spend short periods out of water entirely. These early air-breathing fish were the pioneers of vertebrate life on land. They probably spent most of their time in water, venturing onto land only when absolutely necessary, perhaps to move from one shrinking pool to another, or to escape predators, or to access food sources that weren't available in their aquatic habitat. But over many generations, some lineages became increasingly comfortable with terrestrial life. Their fins became more leg-like, better suited for supporting their weight on solid ground. Their lungs became more efficient, better able to extract oxygen from air. Their skin became less permeable, better at retaining moisture in the dry terrestrial environment. These transitional animals, the early amphibians, were still tied to water for reproduction. Like modern frogs and salamanders, they laid their eggs in water and went through aquatic larval stages before metamorphosing into more terrestrial adults. But they represented a crucial step in the vertebrate colonization of land, proving that it was possible for complex animals to make a living outside of aquatic environments. The amphibians were the bridge builders between water and land, the pioneers who established that vertebrate animals could thrive in terrestrial ecosystems. They paved the way for all the land vertebrates that would follow: the reptiles and birds and mammals, including the lineage that would eventually lead to humans. As you breathe the evening air around you, you're using lungs that first evolved in those early amphibians. As you feel the solid ground supporting your body, you're benefiting from innovations in skeletal structure and muscle organization that were first developed by animals learning to support their weight outside of water. Even your ability to hear sounds in air, like the sound of this voice, depends on ear structures that were first adapted for terrestrial life by early amphibians. Our journey through the animal branches of life's tree brings us now to a group that holds special significance for our story: the mammals. This lineage represents a suite of innovations that fundamentally changed what it meant to be an animal, introducing new strategies for survival that emphasized not just individual success, but investment in the care and education of offspring. The first mammals appeared around 200 million years ago, during the age of dinosaurs. They were small creatures, most no larger than modern shrews or mice, living in the shadows of the giant reptiles that dominated terrestrial ecosystems at the time. But these small, seemingly insignificant animals were quietly developing innovations that would prove to be extraordinarily successful in the long term. The most obvious mammalian innovation was the development of fur and the ability to regulate body temperature internally. This might seem like a simple adaptation, but it was actually revolutionary. For the first time, vertebrate animals could maintain a constant, optimal body temperature regardless of environmental conditions. They could remain active during cool nights, survive in colder climates, and maintain the high metabolic rates necessary for complex behaviors and rapid information processing. The fur that covered these early mammals wasn't just insulation, it was also a sensory organ. Individual hairs could detect subtle changes in air currents, helping small mammals navigate in darkness or detect the presence of predators or prey. This enhanced sensory capability, combined with the ability to remain active in low-light conditions, opened up ecological niches that had never been available to vertebrates before. But perhaps the most remarkable mammalian innovation was the development of milk production and extended parental care. Instead of simply laying eggs and leaving their offspring to fend for themselves, mammals began investing enormous amounts of time and energy in nurturing their young. They developed the ability to produce milk, a perfect food, tailored specifically to the nutritional needs of developing offspring. They extended the period of parental care, teaching their young essential survival skills rather than relying solely on instinct. This shift toward intensive parental investment had profound implications for mammalian evolution. It allowed for the development of larger, more complex brains that could benefit from extended learning periods. It enabled the evolution of sophisticated social behaviors and communication systems. It created opportunities for cultural transmission of information from one generation to the next. The first mammals were already whispering lullabies to their young, not literal songs, of course, but gentle vocalizations that strengthened the bond between parent and offspring, provided comfort and reassurance, and facilitated the learning process that was becoming central to mammalian success. Your own capacity for parental love, for seeking and providing comfort, for learning through extended periods of dependency, all of these are gifts from those early mammals who survived the age of dinosaurs, not through size or strength, but through the power of care, cooperation, and intelligent adaptation to changing circumstances. The mammalian approach to reproduction and child rearing also enabled a new kind of evolutionary flexibility. Instead of being locked into purely instinctual behaviors, mammals could adapt their behavior based on learning and experience. Young mammals could acquire skills and knowledge that hadn't been available to their parents, allowing populations to adapt rapidly to changing environmental conditions. This behavioral flexibility became increasingly important as mammals diversified and spread into new ecological niches. When the dinosaurs became extinct 66 million years ago, mammals were uniquely positioned to expand into the ecological opportunities that became available. Their ability to regulate body temperature, their sophisticated sensory systems, their capacity for learning and behavioral adaptation, all of these mammalian innovations proved ideal for the rapidly changing post-extinction world. As you rest there in the quiet evening, perhaps wrapped in soft blankets or curled up in a comfortable chair, take a moment to appreciate how thoroughly mammalian your experience of comfort really is. Your desire for warmth, your attraction to soft textures, your sense of security in enclosed spaces, these are all expressions of your mammalian heritage, evolutionary gifts from ancestors who survived and thrived by perfecting the arts of thermoregulation, sensory sensitivity, and comfort seeking. Your ability to feel comfort is not just a pleasant luxury, it's a sophisticated biological system that evolved to help mammals make beneficial choices about their environment. The satisfaction you feel when you adjust your position to be more comfortable, the pleasure you take in a warm drink on a cool evening, the sense of security you experience in a safe, familiar space. All of these are your mammalian brain's way of encouraging behaviors that promote survival and well-being. Even your capacity to find this story soothing and interesting reflects your mammalian heritage. The enlarged brain that allows you to process complex language, to form mental images of ancient seas and evolutionary transitions, to feel wonder at scientific discoveries, this is the result of millions of years of mammalian brain evolution, driven by the advantages of intelligence, curiosity, and the ability to learn from experience. Your social nature, your tendency to seek connection and community, your ability to form lasting emotional bonds, these too are mammalian traits, refined over millions of years of evolution in species where cooperation and mutual care provided survival advantages. The pleasure you might take in sharing interesting discoveries with friends, your capacity for empathy, your desire to understand your place in the larger story of life. All of these reflect the deep mammalian wisdom that survival and thriving are often best achieved through connection rather than isolation. Your circadian rhythms, the natural cycles of alertness and sleepiness that make this evening listening session feel appropriate and soothing, are regulated by brain structures that first evolved in early mammals. Your ability to dream, to process experiences during sleep, to wake refreshed and ready for new learning, these are all mammalian innovations that have been refined over tens of millions of years. Even your emotional responses to this story, the sense of wonder, the feeling of connection to deep time, the comfort you might find in understanding your place in the evolutionary tree, these are expressions of the mammalian capacity for complex emotional experiences that motivate learning, exploration, and social bonding. Right now, as you listen to these words, your mammalian brain is doing exactly what millions of years of evolution have prepared it to do: seeking comfort, processing complex information, finding pleasure in learning and understanding, maintaining the warm, steady internal environment that makes consciousness possible. Your heart is beating with a rhythm that first evolved in early vertebrates, pumping warm blood through vessels that carry oxygen from lungs that developed from ancient fish gills. Your muscles are maintaining your posture, using coordination systems that were first perfected by animals learning to move through three-dimensional space. Your nervous system is processing sensory information using neural networks that have been refined over hundreds of millions of years of animal evolution. But beyond these biological processes, you're also experiencing something uniquely mammalian: the capacity to find comfort in understanding, to feel connected to ancestors you've never met, to take pleasure in contemplating vast scales of time and the intricate connections between all living things. This is your mammalian heritage in action, not just the biological machinery that keeps you alive, but the emotional and intellectual capacities that make life rich with meaning and connection. Your ability to lie quietly in the darkness, listening to a story about your own deep history, finding both relaxation and wonder in the same experience, this is exactly what the mammalian approach to life makes possible. As we continue our journey through the evolutionary tree, remember that you carry within you the innovations of every animal lineage we've explored tonight. The basic body plan of bilateral symmetry, the sophisticated sensory systems, the vertebrate backbone, the mammalian warmth and intelligence. All of these are working together right now to create your experience of this moment. You are not separate from the animal kingdom. You are its current flowering, the temporary expression of billions of years of innovation in movement, sensation, learning, and care. Tonight, as you prepare for the mammalian luxury of restorative sleep, you do so as the inheritor of every successful experiment in animal life, every adaptation that allowed your ancestors to move through ancient seas, to colonize the land, to survive mass extinctions, and to flourish in an ever-changing world. Sleep well, dear descendant of all the animals that ever lived. Your dreams tonight will be processed by a mammalian brain. Your body will be maintained by systems that evolved over hundreds of millions of years, and you will wake tomorrow carrying forward the same creative force that first whispered to early animals. Learn to move, learn to seek, learn to care, and the world will become your home. Take a moment now to look at your hands. Perhaps they're resting peacefully in your lap, or holding a warm cup, or simply folded comfortably as you listen. Notice the precise way your fingers curve, how your thumb can touch each fingertip with such delicate control, how your palms can cup around objects or flatten to explore textures. These hands that serve you so faithfully every day carry within them a story that reaches back millions of years, to ancestors who lived their entire lives in the green canopy of ancient forests, reaching through branches toward fruit and light and each other. Tonight, our journey through the evolutionary tree brings us to the primate branch, our own immediate family in the great community of life. This is where the story becomes more intimate, more recognizably human, though still beautifully continuous with all the life that came before. We're following the lineage that learned to grasp not just with muscles and teeth, but with hands and minds. These are the ancestors who discovered that life could be lived in 3 dimensions, swinging through forest canopies, and that survival could depend as much on social intelligence as on individual strength. As we explore this chapter of our story, you might notice how familiar some of these innovations feel. The way you automatically reach for things you want, the way you look into the eyes of people you love, the way you find comfort in being close to others. These are all gifts from your primate heritage, behaviors that were refined over millions of years in forest communities where connection, cooperation, and curiosity were the keys to success. This is the part of our evolutionary story where the distant past begins to feel like family history, where ancient innovations reveal themselves as the foundations of the most human aspects of your daily experience. Let yourself settle in comfortably as we explore the branch of life's tree that leads most directly to you, the primate path that transformed life in the trees into the capacity for thought, art, love, and wonder that makes this very moment possible. Around 55 million years ago, in forests that covered much of what we now know as North America, Europe, and Asia, small mammals began experimenting with a lifestyle that would eventually lead to us. These early primates were not much larger than modern squirrels, but they possessed something that would prove revolutionary: hands that could truly grasp. Imagine what it meant for a small mammal to develop the ability to wrap its fingers around a branch with precision and strength. Suddenly, the three-dimensional world of the forest canopy became accessible in ways that had never been possible before. Instead of just climbing trees like a cat or squirrel, these early primates could move through the canopy with confidence and grace, reaching from branch to branch, accessing food sources that were unavailable to other mammals. But the evolution of grasping hands was just the beginning. In order to navigate successfully through the complex, three-dimensional environment of the forest canopy, these early primates also needed excellent vision. They developed forward-facing eyes that could judge distances accurately, a crucial skill when your life depends on accurately judging the gap between branches. They evolved color vision that could distinguish ripe fruit from unripe, poisonous from safe, helping them make better choices about what to eat. This combination of grasping hands and stereoscopic vision created a feedback loop that would drive primate evolution for millions of years. Better hands allowed access to more complex environments, which required better vision and brain power to navigate safely. Better vision and cognition made it possible to use hands more skillfully, which opened up even more sophisticated ways of interacting with the environment. Your own hands, as you rest there listening, are the direct descendants of those early primate innovations. The ability to touch your thumb to your pinky finger, to manipulate small objects with precision, to explore textures and temperatures, all of this traces back to ancestors who needed these skills to survive in the forest canopy. Even the way you automatically reach for things you want, the unconscious precision with which you grasp a cup or turn a doorknob, reflects millions of years of refinement in primate hand-eye coordination. But perhaps even more importantly, these early primates were developing something that would become central to all future primate evolution: social intelligence. Life in the trees was safer and more productive when lived in groups. Individuals could warn each other about predators, share information about food sources, cooperate in caring for young, and learn from each other's experiences. This social lifestyle required new kinds of intelligence. Primates needed to remember complex relationships: who was dominant to whom, who had been helpful in the past, who could be trusted, who might be competing for the same resources. They needed to communicate effectively, developing calls and gestures that could convey different types of information to other group members. They needed to navigate the subtle politics of group living, building alliances, resolving conflicts, maintaining the cooperation that made group life beneficial. Your own deep need for social connection, your ability to read facial expressions and body language, your capacity for empathy and cooperation, all of these trace back to those early primate communities in ancient forests. The pleasure you take in gentle touch, the comfort you find in the presence of people you trust, your ability to communicate complex ideas and emotions. These are all refinements of social skills that first evolved in primates learning to live together in the trees. The primates also developed something that would become one of their most distinctive characteristics: extended childhood. Instead of becoming independent shortly after birth, young primates remained dependent on their parents for months or years, using this extended period to learn the complex skills needed for arboreal life. They learned which foods were safe, how to navigate through the canopy, how to interpret the social signals of their group, how to build the relationships that would support them throughout their lives. This extended childhood was made possible by the same mammalian innovations we explored in our last chapter: the ability to produce milk, to maintain constant body temperature, to invest heavily in parental care. But primates took these innovations even further, creating childhood periods that were longer and more sophisticated than those of any other mammals. Your own capacity for lifelong learning, your ability to adapt and grow throughout your life, your tendency to remain curious and playful even as an adult. These are all expressions of the primate approach to development, the recognition that in a complex world, learning never really ends. As primates continued to evolve and diversify, they developed increasingly sophisticated ways of living together in their forest communities. They created complex social hierarchies that reduced conflict and ensured that resources were shared fairly. They developed elaborate grooming behaviors that served not just hygienic functions but also social ones. Grooming sessions became opportunities to strengthen relationships, reduce tension, and demonstrate care and affection. The importance of grooming in primate societies cannot be overstated. It was one of the first forms of what we might recognize as compassionate care. One individual spending time and attention caring for another's well-being, not because they had to, but because it strengthened the bonds that held the community together. When you gently stroke a pet, when you massage a friend's shoulders, when you take pleasure in caring for someone else's comfort, you're engaging in behaviors that have their roots in those ancient grooming sessions among our primate ancestors. Primates also developed increasingly sophisticated forms of communication. They created different calls for different types of information. Warning calls that distinguished between aerial predators and ground predators, contact calls that helped group members stay in touch when they couldn't see each other, social calls that expressed everything from contentment to distress to excitement. Some primate groups developed what can only be called cultural traditions, behaviors that were learned and passed down from one generation to the next, varying from group to group in ways that couldn't be explained by genetics alone. Different communities of the same species would use different techniques for finding food, different methods for tool use, different social customs. This cultural transmission represented a new form of inheritance that supplemented genetic inheritance. Instead of only passing down information through DNA, primates could now pass down knowledge through teaching and learning. Young primates could benefit not just from the genetic wisdom of their parents, but also from the accumulated knowledge of their entire community. Your own ability to learn from books, to benefit from the discoveries of people you've never met, to build upon the knowledge of previous generations, this traces back to those early experiments in cultural transmission among our primate ancestors. Every time you learn something new from a teacher, a friend, or even a podcast like this one, you're participating in a form of information sharing that first evolved in primate communities millions of years ago. Around 25 million years ago, one branch of the primate family tree began to develop characteristics that would eventually lead to the great apes, and eventually to us. These early apes were larger than most other primates, with longer arms, more flexible shoulders, and increasingly sophisticated brains. They were perfecting a form of locomotion called brachiation, swinging through the trees using their arms, moving with a fluid grace that seemed almost like flight. But the most significant ape innovation was neurological. Apes began developing larger brains relative to their body size, with more complex neural networks and greater capacity for learning, memory, and problem solving. This wasn't just about raw brain power. It was about a new kind of intelligence that was flexible, creative, and capable of seeing connections between different aspects of experience. Life was investing in curiosity, in the ability to wonder about how things worked and to experiment with new ways of solving problems. Apes began to show behaviors that went beyond simple survival needs. They played more elaborate games, explored their environment more thoroughly, and showed what could only be called artistic preferences in their choices about nests, food, and social companions. This increased intelligence had profound implications for ape childhood development. Young apes needed even longer periods of dependency to develop their full cognitive potential. They spent years learning not just basic survival skills, but also the subtle arts of social navigation, creative problem-solving, and environmental awareness that made ape life successful. The extended childhood of apes created opportunities for innovations that would have been impossible with shorter developmental periods. Young apes had time to experiment, to play, to try new approaches to familiar problems. They could learn not just what worked, but why it worked, developing the kind of deep understanding that could be applied to novel situations. Your own love of learning, your capacity to find joy in understanding how things work, your ability to solve problems creatively rather than just following rigid patterns. These are all expressions of the ape approach to intelligence, the recognition that curiosity and creativity are not luxuries, but essential survival skills in a complex world. Around 7 million years ago, some apes began experimenting with a behavior that would prove revolutionary: tool use. They discovered that sticks could be used to extract insects from logs, that stones could be used to crack open nuts, that leaves could be modified to make them more effective for gathering water or cleaning wounds. Tool use represented a profound cognitive breakthrough. It required the ability to see beyond the immediate properties of objects to their potential uses, to plan ahead, to modify objects to make them more effective for specific purposes. It was the first step toward the kind of technological thinking that would eventually lead to everything from stone axes to spacecraft. But tool use also required something else that would become central to human evolution: the ability to teach and learn complex skills. The most effective tool use techniques were too complicated to be discovered independently by each individual. They needed to be passed down through teaching and imitation, refined and improved over generations. Today, our closest living relatives are the great apes: chimpanzees, bonobos, gorillas, and orangutans. These remarkable beings share an astonishing amount of genetic material with us. Chimpanzees and bonobos, our very closest cousins, share about 98% of their DNA with humans. When you look at a chimpanzee, you're looking at an animal built according to a nearly identical genetic recipe, a recipe that took only slightly different paths during the last few million years of evolution. This genetic similarity reflects our recent common ancestry. Just 6 to 7 million years ago, which is practically yesterday in evolutionary terms, the lineages that would become humans and chimpanzees were still the same species. We share not just genetic material, but also behavioral patterns, emotional responses, social structures, and cognitive abilities that reflect our common heritage. When you watch chimpanzees in a nature documentary, notice how familiar many of their behaviors seem. The way they comfort each other after conflicts, the way they play and laugh, the way they show curiosity about new objects, the way they form friendships and maintain long-term relationships. All of these behaviors reflect the deep continuity between human and chimpanzee nature. Bonobos, our other closest cousins, show us another possible path that primate social evolution could have taken. They've developed a society based more on cooperation and peaceful conflict resolution than on dominance hierarchies. They use physical affection, play, and sexual behavior to maintain social harmony. They show remarkable empathy and altruism, caring for individuals outside their immediate family groups. Gorillas demonstrate the gentle strength that's possible in large-bodied primates. Despite their intimidating size, gorillas are primarily peaceful, spending most of their time foraging for plant foods and caring for their young. They show complex emotional lives, forming strong family bonds and displaying behaviors that can only be described as mourning when family members die. Orangutans reveal the sophisticated intelligence that's possible in more solitary primates. They're remarkable tool users and problem solvers, showing planning abilities and spatial intelligence that rival those of young human children. They create complex sleeping nests each night, choosing materials and construction techniques based on weather conditions and personal preferences. All of these great apes demonstrate capacities that were once thought to be uniquely human: tool use, cultural transmission, emotional complexity, self-awareness, creative problem-solving. They remind us that the qualities we most value in ourselves, intelligence, creativity, empathy, social connection, are not uniquely human, but rather elaborations of capacities that we share with our closest evolutionary relatives. Around 6 million years ago, the lineage that would eventually become human began to diverge from our common ancestors with the chimpanzees and bonobos. This divergence was gradual at first. The early human ancestors were still very ape-like in most respects. But they began experimenting with innovations that would eventually lead to the remarkable transformation that made us uniquely human. The first and perhaps most important of these innovations was bipedalism, the ability to walk upright on two legs. This might seem like a simple change, but it had profound implications for everything that followed in human evolution. Walking upright freed the hands from the need to support body weight during locomotion, making them available for carrying objects, manipulating tools, and eventually for the precise manual skills that would make human technology possible. The early bipedal ancestors were probably still spending significant time in trees, but they were also venturing out into more open environments, woodlands and savannas, where the ability to walk efficiently across open ground was advantageous. Bipedalism allowed them to travel longer distances in search of food, to carry food back to safe locations, to use their hands for gathering and tool use while remaining mobile. But bipedalism also required significant changes in anatomy and physiology. The pelvis had to be restructured to support upright walking, which made childbirth more difficult and dangerous. The spine had to develop new curves to maintain balance in an upright posture. The legs had to become longer and stronger, specialized for walking rather than for the climbing and swinging that had been central to ape locomotion. These anatomical changes were accompanied by changes in life, history, and social organization. Because bipedalism made childbirth more difficult, human infants needed to be born at an earlier stage of development than other ape infants. This meant that human childhood became even more extended and dependent, requiring unprecedented levels of parental investment and community support. Your ability to walk upright, to carry objects while moving, to use your hands for precise manipulation while standing. All of this traces back to those early bipedal ancestors who first experimented with this new way of moving through the world. Even your posture as you sit or lie there listening reflects the spinal curves and muscular adaptations that first evolved for upright walking. Perhaps the most remarkable human innovation was the development of language, not just the simple calls and gestures that other primates use, but the complex, symbolic communication system that allows us to share detailed information about abstract concepts, past events, future possibilities, and imaginary scenarios. The evolution of language was probably gradual, building on the communication systems that humans shared with other primates. But at some point, perhaps 100,000 to 200,000 years ago, human communication crossed a threshold into true symbolic language, with grammar, syntax, and the ability to create infinite new meanings through novel combinations of basic elements. The first human words were probably about the things that mattered most to early human communities, sharing information about food sources, coordinating group activities, caring for children, expressing affection and concern for other group members. Language emerged from the same social intelligence that had characterized primate evolution for millions of years, but it represented a quantum leap in the complexity and precision of social communication. With language came the ability to share not just immediate information, but also stories, traditions, and accumulated knowledge. Human communities could now pass down detailed information about tool-making techniques, seasonal patterns, social relationships, and spiritual beliefs. Culture became as important as genetics in shaping human development and behavior. Your ability to understand these words right now, to form mental images based on spoken language, to feel emotional connections to ancestors you've never met through the power of storytelling. All of this depends on neural circuits and cognitive abilities that evolved specifically for language use. The human brain is wired for language in ways that no other animal brain is, with specialized regions dedicated to processing syntax, meaning, and the social nuances of communication. Language also made possible new forms of thinking. With words to represent abstract concepts, humans could think about things that weren't immediately present. Past experiences, future possibilities, hypothetical scenarios, mathematical relationships, moral principles. Language became both a tool for communication and a tool for thought itself. Around 40,000 to 50,000 years ago, something extraordinary happened in human evolution. Archaeological sites from this period begin to show evidence of something that had never existed before in the history of life: symbolic art. Humans began creating cave paintings, carving figurines, making jewelry, and decorating their tools and clothing with patterns that served no obvious practical purpose. Somewhere in a cave in what is now France or Spain, a human ancestor looked at a blank stone wall and thought, "I can make meaning here." They mixed pigments from ochre and charcoal, dipped their fingers, or perhaps a primitive brush, and began creating images, not just copying what they saw, but transforming their experiences into symbols that could communicate ideas, emotions, and stories to others. This capacity for symbolic representation was revolutionary. It meant that humans could now create objects that carried meaning beyond their immediate function. A carved figure could represent a person, an animal, or even an abstract concept like fertility or protection. A painted image could tell a story, preserve a memory, or express a feeling. Art also represented the emergence of what we might call aesthetic consciousness, the ability to find beauty in things that served no immediate survival function, to create objects primarily for the pleasure of creation and contemplation. This aesthetic sense was probably always present in human nature, but it found its first clear expression in these early artistic endeavors. Your own capacity to find beauty in art, music, poetry, or even in scientific ideas reflects this ancient human innovation. The pleasure you might take in a well-crafted story, the way a beautiful sunset can lift your spirits, your ability to be moved by music or poetry. All of these trace back to those first humans who discovered that meaning and beauty could be created through symbolic representation. The emergence of art also marked the beginning of truly modern human consciousness, the kind of self-awareness that not only knows itself, but can also represent itself symbolically, create narratives about its own existence, and find meaning in abstract concepts like truth, beauty, and connection. As we reach the end of this chapter on our primate heritage, take a moment to appreciate how the innovations we've explored are still active in your experience right now. Your hands, as they rest comfortably, carry the legacy of millions of years of primate evolution. Your eyes, processing the visual world around you, use neural circuits that were first developed for life in the forest canopy. Your social intelligence, your capacity for language, your aesthetic sense, your extended childhood and lifelong learning, all of these are gifts from your primate ancestors. But perhaps most remarkably, your ability to contemplate your own evolutionary history, to find meaning in understanding your place in the tree of life, to feel connected to ancestors you've never met through the power of scientific discovery. This represents the culmination of the primate path toward consciousness, curiosity, and symbolic thinking. You are not separate from the natural world. You are its most recent flowering, the current expression of innovations that began with early primates reaching through forest canopies toward fruit and light and each other. The same reaching, grasping, exploring impulse that served your ancestors in ancient forests now allows you to reach toward understanding, to grasp complex ideas, to explore the deepest questions about existence and meaning. Tonight, as you prepare for sleep, you do so as a primate who has inherited millions of years of innovations in social intelligence, manual dexterity, symbolic thinking, and aesthetic appreciation. Your dreams will be processed by a brain that evolved for life in primate communities. Your comfort-seeking behavior reflects mammalian innovations refined by arboreal living, and your capacity for wonder represents the culmination of the primate path toward consciousness and creativity. Sleep well, dear descendant of tree dwellers and tool makers, of early artists and storytellers. Tomorrow you will wake as the inheritor of every primate innovation, carrying forward the same curiosity that first led your ancestors to explore the three-dimensional world of the forest canopy, the same social intelligence that built communities in ancient trees, the same creative spirit that first looked at cave walls and saw possibilities for meaning-making that had never existed before in the history of life. As you rest there in the quiet of this evening, take a moment to simply exist in your body. Feel your chest rising and falling with each breath. Notice the steady rhythm of your heart. Perhaps shift slightly to find an even more comfortable position. What you're experiencing right now isn't just the peaceful end to another day. It's a living museum of evolutionary history, a collection of innovations that connect you intimately to every other living thing on Earth. Tonight, instead of traveling back through deep time, let's stay right here in this moment and explore the remarkable ways that ancient evolutionary history is still alive in your body. Every cell, every heartbeat, every breath you take carries the signature of relationships that stretch across the entire tree of life. Right now, deep within your body, cells are dividing in exactly the same way that bacteria have been dividing for billions of years. The process hasn't changed. DNA replicates itself with the same elegant precision. Cell membranes pinch in two with the same gentle efficiency. Your skin cells replacing themselves, your immune system generating new defenders, All of this uses the same fundamental process that Luca's descendants perfected in ancient seas. Listen to your heartbeat for a moment. That steady rhythm echoes something much older than any mammalian heart. It's the same basic pumping motion that fish gills have used for hundreds of millions of years to move water over their delicate surfaces. Your heart developed from the same embryonic tissues that become gills in fish, and it beats with the same rhythmic contractions that once pushed oxygenated water through your ancestors' gills. Feel your spine supporting you, whether you're sitting or lying down. That backbone carries within its structure the memory of swimming ancestors, the same flexible support system that allowed early vertebrates to undulate through ancient waters. The curves that keep you balanced upright are refinements of the same basic design that first helped our fish ancestors navigate three-dimensional aquatic space. Even your goosebumps, that automatic response when you're cold or emotionally moved, are inherited from furry ancestors raising their hair for insulation or to appear larger when threatened. Your hair follicles still contract in that ancient pattern, even though you no longer have the thick fur that made this response useful. It's a gentle reminder that your body remembers being covered in the warm coat that helped your mammalian ancestors survive. At the molecular level, you're participating in an ongoing family reunion that includes every living thing on Earth. Your DNA, right now, is telling the same fundamental story that's being told in the cells of trees, mushrooms, and whales. The genetic code is universal, the same four-letter alphabet, the same basic grammar, the same essential vocabulary of life. Consider your pancreas, quietly working as you listen to this story. It's producing insulin using instructions written in exactly the same genetic language that whales use to make their insulin. Your pancreas speaks the same chemical language as a whale's. The insulin molecules are so similar that they're virtually identical. This isn't coincidence, it's family resemblance at the molecular level. Every breath you take uses the same cellular respiration process that powers every living thing. The mitochondria in your cells are using the same biochemical pathways to convert oxygen and nutrients into energy that bacteria perfected billions of years ago. When a bird flies overhead, when a tree grows taller, when a mushroom sprouts after rain, they're all using variations of the same energy conversion system that's humming quietly in your cells right now. The hemoglobin carrying oxygen in your blood is built according to instructions that are cousins to the instructions that build chlorophyll in plants. Both molecules are designed to capture and transport essential gases. Your hemoglobin binding oxygen, chlorophyll capturing carbon dioxide from the air. They're different variations on the same theme, different solutions to similar challenges, written in the same genetic language. Perhaps most remarkably, the genes that built your body used the same basic toolkit that builds every other complex organism on Earth. Evolution is like an architect who has discovered a set of reliable tools and uses them over and over again in different combinations to create different structures. The gene that guided the development of your eyes is cousins with the gene that builds a fly's compound eyes, or a squid's camera eyes, or a scallop's dozens of tiny eyes. Each species has taken the same basic genetic toolkit, the same fundamental instructions for building light-sensitive tissue, and used it to create eyes perfectly suited to their particular way of life. Different rooms in the house of vision, but built using the same architectural principles. Your limbs developed using genes that are closely related to the genes that build a bird's wings, a whale's flippers, or a bat's wing membranes. The same genetic instructions that tell your arm bones how to grow also guide the development of a bird's wing bones. They're all variations on the same basic pattern, the same underlying blueprint adapted for different ways of moving through the world. Even your brain, with all its remarkable complexity, was built using genetic tools that other animals use to build their nervous systems. The neurons firing as you process these words are variations on the same basic cellular design that jellyfish use for their simple nerve networks, that allow an octopus to change color, that help a songbird learn new melodies. This shared toolkit means that you're not separate from the rest of life. You're a unique variation on themes that are being played out in millions of different ways across the living world. Every organism is like a different song played on the same fundamental instrument, using the same basic notes to create something entirely new. As you breathe quietly in this moment, you're participating in processes that connect you to every other breathing thing on Earth. Your cells are working according to instructions written in the same language that guides every living thing. Your body is built using tools from the same toolkit that evolution has been refining for billions of years. You are not an isolated individual, but a walking, breathing expression of the same creative force that builds forests and coral reefs, that guides the migration of whales and the blooming of flowers. Right now, in this very moment, you carry within your body the innovations of every major branch of life's tree: bacterial efficiency, eukaryotic complexity, plant generosity, animal mobility, mammalian warmth, primate intelligence. Tonight, as you prepare for sleep, rest in the knowledge that you are never alone. You are part of the ongoing conversation of life itself, connected at the deepest level to everything that lives, moves, and grows on this beautiful, interconnected planet. As you settle deeper into the comfort of this evening, imagine for a moment that you could see the invisible threads that connect you to every other living thing on Earth. Picture delicate strands of light reaching out from where you rest, connecting you to the trees outside your window, to the birds that might be roosting in those trees, to the soil bacteria cycling nutrients in your garden, to the plankton in distant oceans. If you could see these connections, the night sky would be filled with a glowing web of relationships, a living network that spans the entire planet. Tonight, in our final chapter exploring the evolutionary tree, we step back to appreciate not just the branches themselves, but the countless ways those branches interweave, support each other, and create the magnificent web of life that surrounds and includes you. This is the story of relationships, how life has learned that survival is not just about individual success, but about the countless partnerships, dependencies, and collaborations that make the living world possible. Every breath you take, every meal you digest, every step you take through the world connects you to this web in ways both obvious and wonderfully subtle. You are not a separate being moving through a world of other separate beings. You are a node in a network, a participant in relationships that stretch across species, across continents, across the deepest reaches of time itself. The forest outside your window, if you have one, or the park you might visit, or even the houseplants sharing your space. These aren't just collections of individual organisms trying to survive on their own. They're communities, extended families bound together by relationships that have been evolving for millions of years. Consider the ancient dance between predators and prey, a choreography so old and refined that it shapes the very structure of ecosystems. When a hawk circles overhead, the small birds don't just scatter randomly. They engage in behaviors that have been perfected over millions of years of coevolution. The hawk's hunting strategies have been shaped by the defensive capabilities of its prey, while the prey species have developed escape tactics specifically tuned to the hunting methods of their predators. This isn't a simple story of conflict. It's a story of partnership in the deepest sense. Predators and prey have evolved together, each making the other stronger, more alert, more perfectly adapted to their roles in the community. The hawk's keen eyesight exists because generations of small birds developed better camouflage and evasion techniques. The bird's quick reflexes and complex warning calls exist because generations of hawks became more skillful hunters. You can see this ancient partnership in action anytime you watch birds at a feeder. Notice how they remain constantly alert, how they position themselves to watch for threats, how they respond to each other's alarm calls. These behaviors are the result of millions of years of coevolution with predators, a relationship that has made both hunters and hunted more sophisticated, more aware, more perfectly suited to their roles in the web of life. But perhaps no relationship in the natural world is more beautiful than the partnership between pollinators and flowers. Bees and blossoms wrote love letters in coevolution, each developing features specifically designed to attract and benefit the other. Flowers evolved bright colors, sweet fragrances, and nectar rewards specifically to attract pollinators. Bees developed specialized body parts for collecting pollen and nectar, navigation systems for finding flowers, and communication dances for sharing information about the best flower patches with their hive mates. This partnership is so intimate that many flowers can only be pollinated by specific species of bees, butterflies, or birds. The flower's shape, color, and blooming time are perfectly matched to the feeding behavior and life cycle of its pollinators. In return, the pollinators receive not just food, but food that's been specifically crafted for their nutritional needs. When you see a bee visiting flowers in your garden, you're witnessing one of evolution's most successful partnerships, a relationship that has been refined over tens of millions of years. The bee isn't just collecting food, it's participating in a dance of mutual benefit that allows both partners to flourish. And then there are the relationships that live inside your own body. You are never alone. Trillions of bacterial partners help digest your food, sharing this journey of being alive with you in the most intimate way possible. These gut bacteria aren't just hitchhikers. They're essential partners that you literally cannot live without. Your bacterial partners help break down complex nutrients that your own digestive system can't handle. They produce vitamins that your body needs but can't manufacture on its own. They protect you from harmful bacteria by occupying ecological niches that might otherwise be colonized by pathogens. They even influence your mood and behavior through the production of neurotransmitters that affect your brain. In return, you provide your bacterial partners with a stable, warm environment and a steady supply of food. You are, in the most literal sense, a walking ecosystem, a community of human cells and bacterial cells working together to create the phenomenon you experience as your individual life. The web of relationships extends far beyond local ecosystems to encompass global patterns that connect life across entire continents and oceans. Consider the migration patterns of birds, whales, butterflies, and countless other species. These aren't just impressive feats of navigation. They're the circulatory system of the planet, carrying genes, nutrients, and ecological connections across vast distances. When Arctic terns make their epic journey from Arctic to Antarctic and back each year, they're not just following food sources, they're serving as living bridges between ecosystems that would otherwise be completely separate. The nutrients they absorb in Antarctic waters are deposited in Arctic breeding grounds. The genetic diversity they carry connects polar populations that might otherwise become isolated. Monarch butterflies undertake multi-generational migrations that span continents, with individual butterflies following routes they've never traveled before, guided by genetic instructions refined over millions of years. Each butterfly is a carrier of genetic information, linking populations across thousands of miles, ensuring that the monarch community remains connected despite being spread across vast distances. Ocean currents create another layer of global connection, carrying marine life in vast circular patterns that link ecosystems across entire ocean basins. Plankton that begin life in one part of the ocean may complete their development thousands of miles away. Fish larvae drift with currents that connect breeding grounds to feeding areas. Even whales follow current systems that guide their migrations between feeding and breeding areas. These global connections mean that marine life functions as one flowing family, with boundaries that shift with the currents, relationships that span entire oceans, and breeding populations that may be connected by waters that flow for thousands of miles. Climate patterns add another dimension to these global connections. The same weather systems that bring rain to your region may carry moisture that evaporated from forests on the other side of the continent. The seasonal patterns that trigger migration in your local birds are connected to climate cycles that affect ecosystems around the world. As you rest there in the quiet of this evening, it's worth remembering that the web of relationships you're part of has been tested by extraordinary challenges and has proven remarkably resilient. The tree of life has weathered storms before. 5 major mass extinctions that eliminated most existing species, countless smaller crises, ice ages, volcanic catastrophes, asteroid impacts, dramatic climate changes. Each of these events served as a kind of pruning, eliminating some branches of the tree of life while creating opportunities for others to flourish. The dinosaurs' extinction opened ecological niches that allowed mammals to diversify into the remarkable variety we see today. Earlier mass extinctions cleared the way for new experiments in complexity, new partnerships, new ways of being alive. What's remarkable is not that these extinctions occurred, but that life persisted through them, adapted to them, and ultimately used them as opportunities for innovation and diversification. The web of relationships we see today is the result of billions of years of testing, refinement, and creative adaptation to changing conditions. Life's creativity in the face of change is truly endless. When one approach to survival becomes less viable, evolution finds new approaches. When one type of relationship is disrupted, new types of relationships emerge. When environmental conditions change, life changes with them, often in ways that are more beautiful and sophisticated than what came before. Every species alive today, including us, represents an unbroken success story stretching back to the beginning of life itself. You are the descendant of organisms that survived every mass extinction, adapted to every climate change, overcame every environmental challenge that life on Earth has faced for nearly 4 billion years. Your existence right now is proof that the web of relationships is not fragile but remarkably resilient, not static but dynamically creative, not separate from you but including you as one of its most recent and remarkable innovations. As you prepare to drift towards sleep tonight, you might take comfort in knowing that you are held by this vast web of relationships, supported by the oxygen produced by plants, nourished by food created through countless ecological partnerships, sustained by bacterial allies living within your own body. The tree of life is not just a metaphor, but a living reality that includes you, supports you, and continues to evolve through your participation in its ongoing story. Every choice you make about how to live, how to care for other living things, how to understand your place in the natural world becomes part of the web, part of the ongoing conversation between all life on Earth. Sleep well tonight, knowing that you are never alone, never separate, never isolated from the magnificent community of life that surrounds and includes you. You are part of the web, part of the tree, part of the ongoing story of life's endless creativity and resilience. Tomorrow, you will wake as a participant in relationships that stretch across the planet and back through time to the very beginning of life itself. And so we return to where we began, with you resting peacefully in whatever comfortable space you've chosen for tonight's journey through deep time. But now, perhaps, that question we started with, whether you're truly connected to every sparrow, every mushroom, every blade of grass, has found its answer in the gentle rhythm of your own breathing. You are connected to all life. Not metaphorically, not poetically, but literally, through the chemistry of your cells, the structure of your DNA, the ancient inheritance of being alive. The same genetic code that spells out your human form also spells out the roses in tomorrow's garden and the whales singing in distant oceans. You share the same cellular machinery, the same basic biochemistry, the same fundamental approach to the beautiful challenge of existence. The evolutionary tree we've explored together isn't a hierarchy with some branches higher or lower than others. It's a family tree, where every living thing represents a different expression of the same fundamental creativity that first whispered, "I will continue," in ancient seas. Bacteria and blue whales, mushrooms and maple trees, you and every creature you'll ever encounter, all of us are current chapters in the same magnificent story. From this perspective, loneliness becomes evolutionarily impossible. You carry within your body the genetic whispers of every ancestor who ever lived, share molecular machinery with every living thing on Earth. When you look at the world with this knowledge, everything changes. Every dog you pet, every plant you water, every bird you watch outside your window, you're greeting relatives, acknowledging family members in the vast community of life. Let yourself feel, for a moment, a sense of gratitude for the extraordinary patience of evolution. Billions of years of trial and experimentation, countless generations of refinement and innovation, all leading to this moment when you can lie quietly in the darkness and contemplate your place in the cosmic story. Feel gratitude for the ancestors who survived, an unbroken chain of survival, love, and reproduction stretching back to the very beginning, each generation successfully passing life forward to the next. And remember that evolution didn't stop with you. The story continues tonight in children being born around the world, in seeds sprouting in spring soil, in the quiet work of adaptation and innovation that never ceases. You are both the inheritor of ancient wisdom and the ancestor of future possibilities. As you settle into sleep tonight, let yourself feel held by this vast family tree, supported by roots that stretch back to the very beginning of life itself. Your dreams tonight are the dreams of the cosmos, consciousness contemplating its own magnificent interconnected story. Rest well, dear, relative of all that lives. The tree of life holds you in its countless patient branches. Before you drift away completely, if this journey has brought you any comfort or wonder, perhaps give us a gentle like, and let us know in the comments where in the world you're listening from tonight. It's beautiful to imagine all of us, descendants of the same ancient lineage, finding connection and peace in understanding our shared story. Until next time, may you rest in the knowledge that you are never alone. You are life itself, dreaming of what it means to be alive.